Study Session 2, National Income, Concept and Measurement. Introduction. In the previous study session, we noted that macroeconomics is the study of the aggregate outcomes of economic behavior. Macroeconomics focuses on a selected few outcomes at the aggregate level, one of which is national income. In this study session, we shall examine various concepts in national income and the different approaches, learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to highlight the differences among various national income concepts, measure national income, present the problems associated with national income computation, concept of national income. We all have an understanding of the concept of income on an individual level and or what our own income is. But how should we measure the income of a whole economy? To find the nation's income, do we just add up the income of households, businesses, and government sectors? And how does the rest of the world enter the picture? National income is a term that can be used interchangeably with such terms as national output, national expenditure, and national dividend. Generally, national income is the total value of all goods and services produced annually in a country. It is the total amount of income earned by a country from economic activities in a given year. It includes payment made to all factors of production in the forms of wages, interest, rent, and profit. There are several concepts pertaining to national income. Such concepts include gross domestic product (GDP), gross national income (GNP), net national product (NNP), net national income (NNR), disposable income (DR), real income (RI), GDP at factor cost, and GDP at market prices, and so on. Importance of national income analysis. 1. National income data is useful for research purposes. Researchers make use of the national income data such as output, savings, consumption, income, and employment data. They study and analyze these data and use the trend to make appropriate policy recommendations. 2. National income statistics enable us to know the distribution of income in a country. From wages, rents, profit data, we can see income disparity of different sectors of the society and regard distribution of income. It is only on the basis of these that the government can adopt measures to remove income inequality and restore regional equilibrium. National income statistics enable us to know the distribution of income in a country. From wages, rents, profit data, we can see income disparity of different sectors of the society and regard distribution of income. It is only on the basis of these that the government can adopt measures to remove income inequality and restore regional equilibrium. In addition, with a view to removing these personal and regional disequilibria, the decisions to levy more taxes and increase public expenditure also rest on national statistics. 3. National income data is useful for calculating a country's per capita income, which reflects the welfare level of the country. 4. National income data is useful for planning, for economic planning, Data on a country's gross income, output, savings, and consumption from different sources are needed. Also, long-run and short-run economic models are propounded by economists based on national income data. 5. It tells us the aggregation of a country's national output, income, and product resulting from the income of different individuals, product of industries, and transactions of international trade. 6. National income data forms the basis of national policy, such as employment policy. Gross domestic product. The most frequently used measure of an economy's output or national income is the gross domestic product. GDP measures how much an economy produces in a given period, usually quarterly of a year, that is every 3 months, half yearly, that is every 6 months, or on a yearly basis. It is the market value of all final goods and services that are produced in a country during a given period of time, usually in a year, by all factors of production located within a country. In order to understand this definition, it is important that we examine each of the key words in the definition. These key words are market value, final goods and services produced within a country during a given period of time. Market value. National income, GDP, is an aggregation of the market values of all the goods and services produced in the economy in a given period. Goods and services that are not sold in the market, such as unpaid household work, are not counted in GDP. Important exceptions to this regard are goods and services provided by the government, which are included in GDP as the government's cost of producing them. Final goods and services. It should, however, be noted that not all goods and services that have a market value are counted in GDP. GDP includes only those goods and services that are the end product of production process, which are called final goods and services. Many goods are used in the production process. For example, in order for a baker to produce a loaf of bread, grain must be planted and harvested. The grains must thereafter be milled into fine flour. For example, in order for a baker to produce a loaf of bread, grain must be milled, planted, harvested, mixed with other ingredients, and then baked into bread. Out of these three goods, grain, flour, and bread, that are produced during this process, it is only bread that is used by consumers, since the production of the bread is the ultimate aim of the process. The bread is therefore called a final good. Therefore, be seen that a final good or service is the end product of the production process or the product or service that consumers actually use. The goods and services produced in the process of making the final good, in our example, the grain and the flour, are called intermediate goods and services. Since we are only interested in measuring items that are of direct economic value, only final goods and services are therefore included in the calculation of GDP. Intermediate goods and services which are used or in the production of final goods and services are not counted. To illustrate the distinction between final goods and intermediate goods, let us consider the example. Suppose that a bag of grain has a market value of 5 naira. The price the milling company paid for the grain If the grain then is milled into flour, which has a market value of 10 naira, the price the baker paid for the flour. The flour is then made into a loaf of bread worth 30 naira in the market. In calculating the contribution of these activities to GDP, we cannot add together all the values of the grain, the flour, and bread. This is because the grain and flour are only intermediate goods used in the production of bread. So the total contribution to GDP is 30 naira, which is the market value of the loaf of bread, the final product. A tailor charges 500 naira for each cloth that he makes. The tailor pays his shop apprentice 50 naira per cloth made in return for sweeping the floor and other chores. For each cloth sewn, what is the total contribution of the tailor and his apprentice to GDP? Answer. The answer to this question is simply 500 naira, which is the market value of each cloth sewn. This service is counted in the GDP because it is the final service and one that actually adds value to the final user. The services the apprentice provided are intermediate services and add value only because the services contributed to the production of the making of clothes. Thus, they are not counted in GDP. Example 3. A farmer produces 1,000 naira worth of cattle milk. He sold 300 worth of milk to his friend and used the rest of the milk to feed his livestock, which he at the end sold to his friend for 1,500 naira. What is the farmer's contribution to GDP? The milk the farmer produced serves as an intermediate good and part as a final good. The 700 naira, that is 1,000 minus 300 naira worth of cattle milk that was fed to the livestock is an intermediate good. Thus, it is not counted as part of GDP. Whereas the 300 naira worth of cattle milk sold to his friend is a final good. So, it is counted thus. Final goods in this example above are the 300 naira worth of cattle milk and the 1,500 naira worth of livestock that the farmer sold to his friend. Adding 300 naira to 1,500 naira makes 1,800, which is the farmer's contribution to GDP. As earlier pointed out, intermediate goods are not counted in GDP to avoid double counting. Double counting can also be avoided by counting only the value added to a product by each firm in the production process. The value added method will be explained later in the course of the study. Produced within a country during a given period. The word domestic used in the definition of gross domestic product tells us that GDP is a measure of economic activities within a given country. Therefore, only goods and services produced within the country's borders are counted. The GDP of Nigeria includes the market value of all goods and services produced within the Nigerian borders, even if they are made in foreign-owned industries or produced by foreigners. Also, goods and services produced in Ghana by a Nigerian-based company like Globalcom, etc. are not counted. In addition, only goods and services produced during the current year or the portion of the value produced during the current year are counted as part of the current year's GDP. Also, profits earned in Nigeria by foreign-owned companies are counted in Nigeria's GDP. For example, while the output of foreigners working in Shell, Exxon, Mobil, etc. are counted as part of GDP, output produced by Nigerians abroad are not counted. Example 4. Suppose a 10-year-old house is sold to Mr. A for 5 million naira and Mr. A pays the real estate agent in charge of the sales a commission of 1%, which is 50,000 naira. The contribution of these economic activities to GDP is only 50,000 naira. Generally, purchases and sales of existing assets such as old houses or used cars do not contribute to the current year's GDP. Since the house was not produced during the current year, its value, 5 million naira, is not counted in this year's GDP. This is so because the value of the house has already been included in the GDP 10 years ago, which was the year the house was built. However, the 50,000 naira will be included in GDP because the 50,000 fee paid to the real estate agent represent the market value of the agent's services in helping Mr. A to find purchasers for the house. Since these activities were provided during the current year, the agent's fee is counted in the current year's GDP. On the whole, the following are not included in the calculation of GDP. A. Goods and services that have no market value are not included in GDP because it will be impossible to have a correct estimation of their market prices. Such goods and services that have no market value include those rendered free of charge. Examples include the bringing up of a child by the mother, songs recited to friends by a musician, etc. B. Intermediate goods and services are not included in GDP. This is because many of the intermediate goods pass through a number of production stages or processes before they are finally purchased or consumed. If these products are not counted at every production stage, they would be included many times in GDP, leading to the problem of double counting, and as a result, the GDP would increase too much or be overstated. Therefore, to avoid double counting, only the market value of the current product and not the immediate product should be included in the GDP. C. The transactions that do not arise from the current year product or which do not contribute in any form to production are excluded in GDP. Thus, the sale and purchase of old goods, fairly used goods, and of shares, bonds, and assets of existing companies are all excluded in GDP because they do not make any addition to national product and the goods are simply transferred. D. Likewise, transferred payment, that is, money that you do not work for, such as payments received under Social Security, e.g., unemployment insurance, allowance, scholarship, bursary, gifts, and bequests, or old age pension and disability pension are also not included in GNP because the recipient do not provide any service for them. The profit and or loss incurred on account of changes in capital assets as a result of the fluctuation in market prices are not included in GDP. If and only if they are not responsible for the current year production or current year economic activity. For example, if the price of a house increases due to inflation, the profit earned by selling such a house will not be part of GDP. But if a portion of the house is constructed anew during the current year, the increase in the value of the house will be included in GDP. Similarly, variations in the value of assets, which can be ascertained beforehand and that are therefore insured against uncertainties such as flood, fire, etc. are not included in GNP. Note, however, that the depreciation of machine, plants, and other capital goods is not deducted from GDP. Income earned through illegal activities such as smuggling, drug trafficking, children trafficking, prostitution, etc. are not included in GDP. Also, goods sold in the black market are excluded, although they are priced and fulfill the needs of the people, but from the social point of view, they are not useful, and thus the income received from their sales and purchases is always not included in GDP. Nominal versus real GDP. GDP of a country may rise or fall due to an increase or decrease in prices. The rise or fall in GDP may, however, not be real. That is, GDP might not increase or fall in the real sense. GDP at factor cost. In national income accounting, it is usual to also find terms like GDP at factor cost. GDP at factor cost is the sum of the monetary value of all goods and services produced by the factors of production or the income accruing to the various factors of production in 1 year in a country. Gross National Product, GNP. Gross National Product is the market value of all goods and services produced by all the nationals, that is, citizens of a given country, irrespective of whether they reside within the domestic country or abroad. It includes the output or income of all the citizens of the country resident in the domestic country, as well as the output or income of the citizens of the country who are abroad. The income of citizens of the country living abroad is termed factor income from the rest of the world. Unlike GDP, it excludes the output from foreigners residing in the domestic country. Thus, it subtracts the income of the foreigners living in the domestic country, that is called payment of factor income to the rest of the world. GNP therefore takes account of three components, which are the income or output of citizens of the country residing in the country, that is GDP, the income or output of citizens residing abroad, factor income from the rest of the world, and excludes the income or output of foreigners residing in the domestic country, factor income to the rest of the world. Because GNP considers only the output of nationals of the country, GNP is GDP plus receipt of factor income from the rest of the world, less the payment of factor income to the rest of the world. Where the difference between the receipt of factor income from the rest of the world and the payment of factor income to the rest of the world is termed net factor income from abroad. GNP is therefore GDP plus net factor income from abroad. Net National Product, NNP. It can be recalled that GNP includes the value of total output of a country. In the production of these output of goods, capital goods such as machinery, equipment, etc. are used. Some of this equipment wear out, their components are damaged or destroyed, and others become obsolete through technological improvement. All these are termed depreciation or capital consumption allowance. In essence, fixed capital is subject to depreciation. To calculate NNP, we subtract depreciation from GNP because the word net refers to the exclusion of the part of total output that has depreciated. Thus, net national product is gross national product minus depreciation. That is, NNP is equal to GNP minus depreciation. Domestic income. Domestic income is similar to GDP. but is particular about income earned on the output produced. Domestic income is the income earned or generated by all the factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship within a given country from its own resources. Domestic income includes wages and salaries earned by labor, rent, including imputed house rent earned by land, interest on capital, dividend, undistributed corporate profit, including the surpluses of public sector undertakings, other incomes consisting of profit of unincorporated firms, partnership, self-employed, and direct taxes. Domestic income does not include the income earned abroad, and so it is the difference between national income and net income earned from abroad. Note, however, that net income earned from abroad can be positive or negative. It is positive if income earned on export is greater than payment made on imports. In this case, national income will be greater than domestic income. Whereas if payments made on imports exceed receipts from export, net income earned from abroad will be negative. Thus, domestic income will be greater than national income. That domestic income can also be gross or net. Personal income. This refers to an individual's total earnings from wages, investment enterprises, and other ventures. It is the total income received by the individuals of a country from all sources in 1 year before it is subjected to direct taxes. Per capita income. Per capita income is defined as the ratio of a country's income to its population, while GDP per capita is defined as the ratio of the country's GDP to the population of the country. Per capita GDP or per capita income gives the value of the average income per person in the country. If the value is high, it shows that the standard of living of an average person is high, and if the value is low, it indicates that the standard of living per head is low. Per capita income equals national income over total population. Per capita GDP equals GDP over total population. Disposable income. Disposable income or personal disposable income is the actual income which an individual spends on consumption. It is the income that remains after direct taxes have been deducted from one person's income. Thus, disposable income equals personal income minus direct taxes. Measuring GDP. There are three basic approaches to the measurement of GDP. These are the value added approach, the income approach, and the expenditure approach. The value added approach. The value added by any given firm equals the market value of its product or services minus the cost of the input the firm purchased from other firms. The major advantage of the value added approach is that it eliminates the problem of dividing the value of a final good or service between two periods and thus prevents the double counting problems. Illustration. Let us now illustrate the value added method by revisiting the example of bread making as given in illustration 1. We have already determined that the total contribution of this production process to GDP is 30 naira, which is the value of the bread. It can be shown that we can get the same answer, 30 naira, by summing up the value added. Suppose that bread making is the ultimate product of these three firms. Dangote Grain Company produces grain, Lista Flour produces flour, Agege bread making firm produces the bread. Given the market value of the grain, the flour, and the bread, what is the value added by each of these companies? Answer. Value added for any firm is the market value of its product or service minus the cost of input purchased from other firms. So, for these three firms, their value added can be calculated thus. Dangote Grain Company. Dangote Grain Company produced 5 naira worth of grain using no input from other companies. Since it purchased no input from other companies, therefore the cost of input purchase is 0. Dangote's value added is therefore 5 naira, which is the market value of its product less the cost of input purchase. Thus, Dangote Grain Company's value added equals 5 naira minus 0 naira, which equals 5 naira. Lister Flour Company. Lister Flour purchased 5 naira worth of input grain from Dangote and used it to produce 15 naira worth of flour. The value added by Lister Flour Company is thus the market value of its product 15 naira less the cost of the input it purchased 5 naira, which gives 10 naira. That is 15 naira minus 5 naira. Agege bread making firm. Finally, Agege bread making firm buys 15 naira worth of flour from Lister Flours and uses it to produce 30 naira worth of bread. So the value added by Agege bread making firm is the market value of its product minus the cost of input it purchased from Lister Flour Company. That is, Agege bread making firm's value added equals 30 naira minus 15 naira, which equals 15 naira. Note that the summation of the value added by each company gives the same answer as the method of calculation of final goods and services that is shown in illustration 1. Thus, summing the value added by all the firms in the economy gives the total value of final goods and services, or GDP. Income approach. Income approach to the calculation of GDP measures GDP in terms of who receives it as income. According to this approach, national income is the sum of 8 income items, which are compensation of employees. This is the largest of the 8 items and includes the wages and salaries paid to households by firms and by the government, as well as the various supplements to wages and salaries, such as contributions that employers make to pension fund and social insurance. 2. Proprietor's income. This is the income of unincorporated businesses. 3. Rental income is the income received by property owners, such as houses in the form of rent. 4. Corporate profit. This is the income of corporations. 5. Net interest is the interest paid by businesses. Note that interest paid by households and the government is not counted in GDP because it is not assumed to flow from the production of goods and services. Direct taxes minus subsidies. These include taxes such as sales tax, license fees, custom duties, etc., less subsidies that the government pays for which it receives no goods and services in return. The value of indirect taxes minus subsidies is therefore the net income received by the government. Net business transfer payment. These are the net transfer payment by businesses to others and are therefore the income of others. Surplus of government enterprises. This is the income from government enterprises. However, it should be noted that national income is the total income of the country, but it is not quite the GDP. The national income is GDP less net factor income from abroad, less depreciation, less statistical discrepancy. The national income is the income of the country's citizens and not the income of the residents of the country, and therefore we need to move from GDP to GNP. After subtracting depreciation from GNP, what we get is called NNP, Net National Product. The net national product and national income are the same except for a statistical discrepancy which may lead to differences between the two. If the government is absolutely accurate in its data collection, its statistical discrepancy will be zero. However, data collection is not perfect and the statistical discrepancy is the measurement error in each period. Therefore, national income is net national product less statistical discrepancy. Expenditure approach. The expenditure approach considers GDP in terms of expenses incurred on purchases of goods and services produced by a country. The expenditure approach sums the expenditure from the four main economic agents in the country, which are the households, the firms, the government, and the rest of the world. There are four main categories of expenditure, and these are: 1. Personal consumption expenditure. This includes household spending on consumer goods. It is denoted by C. 2. Gross private domestic investment. This includes spending by firms and households on new capital such as plants and machinery, equipment, inventory, and net resident structures. 3. Government consumption and government gross investment. Government also makes some purchases and consumes. Government consumption can be on current expenditure such as the payment of salary, or capital expenditure, which are like investment. Net export, X minus M. This is a net spending by the rest of the world, or export minus import. We should study further the components of GDP. Personal consumption expenditure. It has a value of 50, and the breakdown is durable goods 20, added to non-durable goods 25, added to services, and then we have 50. Gross private domestic investment, the total is 100, and the breakdown is non-residential 40, residential 45, change in business inventory 15, which adds up to 100. Government consumption and gross investment, it has a total of 80, and the breakdown is federal 49, state and local government 31, which equals 80. Net export, X, the total is 30, and it has a breakdown of export 50 and import 20. So the gross domestic product has a value of 200. The expenditure approach calculates GDP by adding together all these four components of spending. In equation form, GDP equals consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus export minus import. National income measurement problems. There are several problems that are encountered in the computation of national income. Some of these are: number 1, problems of double counting. The greatest difficulty in measuring national income is that of double counting, which arises from the improper distinction between final and an intermediate product. There is always the possibility of a good or a service being included more than once. 2. There is also the difficulty of defining nation in national income. Although every nation has its political boundaries, the income earned by nationals of a country in a foreign country beyond the territorial boundaries of that country is also included in national income. 3. The problem of measuring non-market or domestic activities. National income is always measured in monetary value, but there are a number of goods and services that are difficult to measure or assess in terms of money and are therefore excluded. Such activities include housework, childcare, driving one's car, and so on. They are excluded in GDP, though they amount to real production. However, if one decides to send his or her child to the daycare or hire a cleaner or a chauffeur to drive his or her own car, GDP will increase because the salary of the daycare staff, cleaners, and chauffeur will be counted in GDP, whereas the time spent by individuals in doing the same activities is not counted. Excluding all such activities will make national income to be less than what it should actually be. Number 4, income earned through illegal activities also makes national income to be less because they are excluded from GDP. Number 5, measuring national income in monetary terms leads to the underestimation of real national income. This is because national income measured in monetary value does not include the labor foregone in the process of production of a commodity. For instance, if two individuals earn the same amount as income, but if one of them works for longer hours than the other, it will be right to state that the real income of this individual has been understated. Number 6, some public services cannot be estimated correctly. For example, how should police and military services be estimated? In days of war, the forces are active, but during peace, they rest in their cantonment. Also, measuring the contributions of profit earned on certain projects, such as power projects and irrigation, to national income in terms of money is a difficult task. Summary. In this study session, you explored various concepts that are embedded in national income. You also learned how to calculate national income using value-added approach, income approach, and expenditure approach. Lastly, you examined the various problems facing the computation of national income. This is the end of study session 2. Thanks for listening.